Hello friends, welcome to yet another episode of the Sunny Shah Show. It is my pride and honor to have a distinctive leader today who served the Indian Army for 25 years and has been a corporate coach, a leadership coach for 15 years. Both of this as a combination makes him an extremely versatile leader to connect and learn more about the four cornerstones of leadership. Colonel Ajai Lal, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Sunny. It's so wonderful to be at this Sunny Shah show.
And even before we start, Jai Hind, sir.
Jai Hind.
You and I have always had this conversation, and I've been privileged knowing you for a long time now. But for our audience's sake, sir, I would want to start from the very beginning. What inspired you to join the Indian Armed Forces? And can you tell us a little bit more about that journey that you had with the Indian Army?
Absolutely, Sunny. And thank you for this question to retrace my memory back. So, Sunny, to answer your question, I'm a second generation Army officer. My father was erstwhile in the British Army and then in the Indian Army. And both my elder sisters are married to Army officers.
So, family.
Yeah. So I grew up with a passion for the uniform. And a simple way to answer your question, I would say it's a blend. What inspired me was a blend. It was a blend of my passion for the uniform. It was a blend for the aura of the uniform. It was a blend of patriotism. It was a blend that I wanted to follow a career which is more than a career, but it had purpose and impact. And I believe that with the Army, I've responded to my calling to lead a life of meaning, of contribution, and with courage.
If you don't mind me asking, how old were you when you joined the Indian Armed Forces?
I was 15 and a half years.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yes, 15 and a half years I joined the National Defense Academy.
Can you walk us through some of your most formative experiences while serving the Indian Army?
Absolutely. So let me start by where you asked me this question, how old you were. So I was 15 and a half years, Sunny, when I joined the National Defense Academy. And that was a training for 3 years, followed by 1 year at the Indian Military Academy. So both these are one of the world's finest institutions. And these are the institutions which really transforms officers into mission-oriented, into physically, mentally, emotionally robust and resilient leaders. And if I can say, the motto of both these institutions, the National Defense Academy motto was service before self. And the Indian Military Academy motto was वीरता or विवेक, valor and wisdom. So we were baptized in fire with these mottos. And when I got commissioned from IMA, I think I spoke to you earlier also about the Chetwood motto. That is ingrained, it's immortalized in us. And what does it read like? It reads, the safety, honor, and welfare of your country comes first, always and every time. Everything else follows. So from the Indian Military Academy, I got commissioned in the Sindh Horse. That's a Armored Corps regiment. It's a 187 years old armed regiment. And it has got a very interesting motto. And the motto is, man dies, but the regiment lives. So we got indoctrinated to ensure that the regiment is always uppermost. The regimental badge is always uppermost. And a mission, once designated, must be accomplished. And thereafter, I moved to 46th Armored Regiment, which I later commanded. And the motto of 46th Armored Regiment was Vajra Prahar Prachand Var, which means lightning strike, total annihilation. Now that implies being proactive, take action, offensive action, because no ground can ever be gained by defensive measures. So in the earlier part of my career, serving with both these regiments really transformed the way I perceived leadership and the style of leadership. And if I just traverse a little further, I served 25 years in the military as part of the cavalry, and a number of challenging and life-threatening experiences which really transformed my leadership style over the years. Just a couple of them, Sunny. The first was as part of the 𝗖PKF, Indian Peacekeeping Force. When the Indian Army was deployed in Sri Lanka, we were engaged with the LTTE. So they were a rebel group which was fighting for an independent state. That experience, Sunny, really battle-tested my leadership in volatile situations and how do you handle setbacks. So that was one. And another very interesting experience was, Sunny, with the United Nations, when I led the Indian Army contingents as a senior military observer for 2 consecutive United Nations missions in Cambodia.
What years were these?
This was in the year 92, 93. And in these missions, we were engaged with the Khmer Rouge. I wonder if you've heard of Khmer Rouge.
No.
So they were a communist group which had slaughtered 25% of the population of Cambodia.
Oh.
So we were engaged in conflict resolutions and negotiations with the Khmer Rouge. And I led a multicultural team from 33 different countries. There were officers who were reporting to me. Again, a very challenging experience, Sunny, and gave me the exposure to lead in a multicultural environment. And the last I'd like to share with you, and then I'll turn it back over to you, Sunny, is when I commanded the armed regiment. I commanded my armed regiment, 46th Armed Regiment. And I believe command of a regiment is truly the acid test of inspirational leadership. So that's the little flavor of my journey and what transformed the way I lead. So that's a snapshot, Sunny.
I get goosebumps, the passion that you carry towards the armed forces and the experience that you keep sharing. If you don't mind, I want to have a follow-on question on the similar lines. You spoke about right from your formative years where these bodies would instill the sense of patriotism in a young boy who's turning to be a man, putting country before an own self. It's a big thing. How do you live with that life of passion? What does a soldier feel when he or she is at a battlefield? Can you tell me more about those experiences? What makes you so brave when you're facing an enemy in a front line, that you're so fearless? Somebody in their teenage or somebody in their early 20s getting into these kind of conflicts, not having any fear but only a sense of patriotism towards the motherland. Just wanted to know more about those experiences of yours.
Yeah, if I step back, Sunny, you started the conversation with 4 cornerstones of inspirational leadership. And if I really distill my 50 years of experience over leadership, and I come to what really matters. So what I came to were the 4 cornerstones of inspirational leadership. And why cornerstones? Because cornerstones are the basic. They are the essential, most important elements without which there can be no success. So these 4 cornerstones, the first cornerstone is the question you asked me. The first cornerstone is passion.
So let's go deep into this. We would like to know more about the 4 cornerstones and also what experiences you had which made you form this concept that you preach so aggressively. So let's go straight into those 4 cornerstones, and I'd like to know more about the first cornerstone that you just started talking about.
Okay. Firstly, Sunny, these are not found, these cornerstones. They are not discovered. We've actually been battle tested. We are battle inoculated. We are indoctrinated with these 4 cornerstones. And the first one I mentioned was passion.
Passion.
The second is people. The third is performance. And the fourth is legacy.
Passion, people, performance, and legacy.
Legacy. So let's talk about the first one. That's the question you
Yes.
actually started asking me. Passion. So what really is passion? Passion is it's endless enthusiasm. It's outrageous enthusiasm. It is an intense desire. It is an intense excitement over something or about doing something. That's passion, right? And the flip side of passion is that you love something so much that you're willing to even suffer for it. So that's the theoretical definition of passion.
Right.
So now let me give you an analogy from the military, right? There is one unique difference, Sunny, between the corporate and the combat space. Combat leaders in the military lead troops into battle without any extraneous motivation. No material incentives, no performance bonuses, no stock options whatsoever. So how do they lead? They lead by sheer, unadulterated, inspirational leadership and by developing and leveraging the passion and the spirit of a soldier. So let your listeners walk in the boots of a soldier just for a minute and sense what would they think generates that indomitable spirit of a soldier to even make the supreme sacrifice and lay down his life for the sake of the mission. My understanding is that this is the passion and the spirit which is indoctrinated in all soldiers. And if I break down passion, I would say it would imply three tenets, three undying and timeless tenets which are tattooed in the hearts and the minds of all soldiers. And these three tenets are an acronym, MVP, mission, values, and pride. I believe these three tenets, Sunny, are not only applicable in the military, but they are highly applicable to individuals, leaders, and organizations across the board. So, if you want me to go a little further into explaining very briefly what really would mission, values, and pride really imply.
Yes.
So, mission is simple. Why do we exist? What's the purpose of our very existence? That's the mission. So, the mission is critical in the Indian Army, and not only in the Army, Sunny, as individuals, leaders, and organizations. We need to have striking clarity on our mission. And then be willing to stay in the fight despite the obstacles, the risks, the resistance, and opposition. Because if there is nothing that can make you quit, there is nothing that can make you fail. And we need to be both relentlessly stubborn and agile. Stubborn to stick to the mission and not quitting, but agile during the process. So that's a little upshot on mission. Values is the next. That's very important, whether in the military, whether in the corporate world. And what is values? Simply put, what's important to you? That's values. They are principles and standards of behavior. They become a default system, Sunny. They influence us in our decision making, behaviors when we are under stress, and in analyzing and solving challenges, particularly in the face of adversity. So that is values. And in the military, we have core values, and they are timeless, Sunny. They are carrying on from years, and they are integrity, loyalty, duty, respect, courage, honor, and selfless service. But here's the important point, Sunny. Now, these are not fancy words. They are not fancy adjectives. They are not artifacts hanging on the walls. But these values are infused in action, blood, sweat, and spirit of every soldier.
Interesting.
So these values, sometimes we have to reflect to ourselves. What are our values? What's important to us? And the last element of passion, we spoke about mission, we spoke about values, and that's pride. Pride is what inspires us. Pride, Sunny, is what energizes hearts and mobilizes minds. In the army, in the military, that moves us into victory, first in the heart and the 16 inches between the heart and the mind. And I don't want your listeners to get it wrong. It's not pride that borders on arrogance. It's pride that espouses respect and honor. So we wear the regimental badge on our caps. That's a symbol of inspiration and intense pride in the regiment, to the extent soldiers rally around and are willing to lay down their lives for the sake of the mission and for the sake of the pride, glory, and reputation of the regiment. That's the pride they have.
Very inspiring.
And that's the same pride, Sunny, which needs to be inculcated in anybody who's serving any organization. How proud are you of your organization? How about your self-esteem? How about your self-regard? Because I believe one thing, even as individuals, you can never outperform your self-image. So, the short answer now to your question, Sunny, when you spoke about passion, is these three things. Mission, values, and pride. So if your mission is inspiring and clear, and if your values are infused in your whole being, and your pride is ingrained in everything that you do, then your passion and your spirit will be invincible, and nothing can ever stop you. So that's about passion.
So that's the first cornerstone.
That's the first cornerstone, right? Let's get to the next. Would you want me to do that?
Absolutely.
People. The one word I like to leave your listeners on this cornerstone of people is one word: caring. People, Sunny, don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Very well said.
And caring, what is it? It is dealing with people with empathy, with compassion, with kindness, creating a feeling that they are important, they are valued, they're not just a head count, they are a heart count. That kind of a feeling needs to be generated amongst people. And you make people feel seen. You make people feel heard. and you engage with people to find out what is their heart, what is their hurts, and what are their hopes. So that's the big point about people and caring. And if I share with you a very extreme question on caring from the military, which will convey the essence to people in other walks of life. In the military, when soldiers are asked the question, what made you risk your life for the sake of your comrade? The answer given is always simple, because we believe they would have done
The same.
exactly the same for us. So this sacrificial spirit is actually what sustains mission. So I'm not suggesting make supreme sacrifices. That's not what I'm suggesting. But what I'm suggesting is that's the essence of care, of trust and bonding between peoples and leaders in organizations. So that's the one word for people, which is caring. And good leaders first touch people's heart, and then, Sunny, they seek their hand.
As you were narrating this whole importance of empathy and caring as an essential cornerstone of leadership, I was able to get into a visual thought process of, I've seen multiple organizations, we've seen various teams, and I think that actually is a significantly important leadership quality that makes it or breaks it.
Absolutely.
And you very well said the fact that if you don't care about people, they may not care about your business. So
Absolutely.
that's an essential ingrained definition of true leadership. Tell me more about it.
Okay, we spoke briefly about people.
Yep.
And where did I leave that? I left people by just sharing one sentence. Leaders first touch people's heart.
Yep.
Then they seek the hand. And that gets me to the third cornerstone. And the third cornerstone is performance. And I like one-worders at times because they stick with people.
Yep.
The one word I would leave for performance is daring. And daring is about accomplishing missions. It's about achieving goals. And you rightly said, Sunny, when people feel cared for, then they are inspired to embrace challenges, to take on stretch goals, to take on bold, audacious, daring goals. They're willing to take risks, explore, discover. And that too, without any fear of failure, but with an attitude of relaxed efficiency. So that is what these two words of people and performance, caring and daring, how they interplay with each other. And in my journey, leadership, both in the military and in the corporate, when I reflected, we actually followed 4 disciplines of performance, of execution. And those 4 disciplines were, first was focus on wildly important goals, like you mentioned business goals, on wildly important goals, the critical goals, because for that you need courage. To prioritize one goal, that means you have to deprioritize other goals. And that requires courage because everybody wants to achieve everything. That's the first aspect, the discipline. The second discipline is to act on lead measures. What moves the ball down the field? Act on lead measures. The third is every person wants to see a scoreboard. How are they performing? So have a compelling scoreboard, and importantly, to create a culture of ownership. So that's what are a couple of my thoughts, Sunny, on this third cornerstone of performance.
Interesting. So, in a way, if you look at, and we'll come to the fourth cornerstone in a moment, but if you look at the first three, the way I was able to visualize it is passion, care, in a way, accelerate performance. So, to an extent, while they are beautifully narrated as cornerstones of leadership, they intersect.
Absolutely.
And it's a cumulative success of how effective you are in each of these corners that determines the success of a leader in an organization.
Absolutely.
Is that a
Sunny.
fair way of putting this across?
Perfect. You just nailed it, Sunny. That's it. It's not either or. They're all at play together. And let me just complete with the fourth cornerstone,
Sure.
which is legacy.
Legacy.
Because there is no success without a successor. Someday, Sunny, people will summarize all of us in one sentence. So what do the wise people do? They choose that sentence now. So find out what their legacy should be, and then they live their legacy. It's not that, are you leaving a legacy or not? That's not the right question, actually. You are leaving a legacy. The point is, what kind of legacy are we leaving? I remember somewhere during my service during the military and the corporate, I coined these 4 words for myself as to what legacy I'd like to live with. And I coined these 4 words: people first, mission always. People first, mission always. And these 4 words, Sunny, has held me in good stead over my 50 years of a leadership journey in the military, in the corporate, and now as a coach. And what does it mean? It means to hold the mission in focus, to hold the people with care, and don't compromise either. That's what it means. And answering your question, of course, is the interplay of all these 4 cornerstones, Sunny. Passion, which is mission, values, pride. People, caring.
Yeah.
Performance, daring. And legacy. So it's the interplay of these 4 cornerstones which actually unleashes the potential of people and teams. And that is when missions are accomplished and goals are achieved.
Oh my God. This is like an aha moment of this episode. You almost gave a mantra to success to any leader in any field, in any industry, in any genre. You just gave a very simple outlay of how anybody can adopt to these 4 cornerstones and lead a successful leadership career.
Absolutely. And Sunny, just I'd like to add this. Leaders dream more than what others think as practical.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
They expect more than what others think as possible. But they care for people more than what others think as wise. That's the time, Sunny, and I've experienced that. When people and teams, they build their ability, they build their faith to see the invisible, to believe that incredible, and that propels them to achieve the impossible. That's when teams are built.
This is like this. If you now look at any successful organization, any successful business, any successful success story, may it be a game of cricket, or building a world-class team, or it could be building billions of dollars of businesses, or building remarkable accolades in any field. I think somewhere if you lift the lid and go to the bottom of things, the foundational pillars, I am sure, would be intercepting around what you just told us.
I believe so.
And I think it's almost like an elementary understanding that every leader should have. We'll go a little more around what you do before I move on to the next question, sir, if I may. How do you help organizations and leaders accomplish their goals and objectives? What do you do as a coach, as an entrepreneur leadership coach? How do you make successful leaders, and what's your role in the whole scheme of things?
Okay. So if you're talking about Sunny, my role as a coach to develop leaders, I would put it as simply as what I call as a leadership triad. And what is a leadership triad? Simply put, the first is you have to have the ability to lead yourself. It's the I.
Yeah.
It's the subjective part of leadership, to lead your own self first. The second, since it's a triad, the second piece is the we, is to lead others,
Yeah.
to connect with people. That's more about connection, relationships, networking, trust. So that's the second
Right.
of the leadership triad. And then once you have these two in place of leaders in businesses, you've been able to lead yourself, your ability to lead others. Now it's about leading businesses. It is about it. It is about doing. That is where you focus on various competencies about strategies and getting market capitalization, growth, etc. So one, I would say, is these three aspects of the leadership triad. Of course, I would impress upon leaders to focus on these four cornerstones, which I shared about with you just a little while ago. And a very important element, I would say, I would spend a little more time on, is building trust as leaders in any organization. You have to have the ability to build trust with people. And once you build trust, and what is trust? It is developing your character and your competence. Character is your integrity, it's your intent. And competence is your capabilities, and it's your results, it's your track record. So the leadership triad, the ability to build trust, and in corporates, as we go along, there has to be a definitive culture which is in any organization. I'm not sure whether you want any insight on my thoughts on culture of organization, how leaders could build that. But that, again, is a very important aspect of how to coach leaders to build up a particular culture. Building up a cadence of ownership and accountability in an organization. There has to be a cadence of ownership and accountability. So a lot of these elements, when we speak about, helps a leader to
Right.
go to the next level. It pushes up the leadership lid.
Very interesting. Since you spent a considerable amount of your life in the military and then in the corporate world, what parallels do you draw between a military leadership and a corporate leadership? Does it require any kind of adaptation before we implement those principles in the corporate life? Can you tell us more about it, please?
Okay, so thanks for this wonderful question, Sunny. Let me say that since you started with the military leadership principles have been honed through the ages, right? They've been refined and they always deliver. I'm sure you would tend to agree with me. So I feel that the principles in the military and in the corporate, there are more similarities than there are differences. Because if we just take an overview and we peel off all the layers of whether military or corporate leadership, we peel off the layers, what's left at the core? At the core, it's people.
Right.
Same people, passed out same schools, same colleges. So I feel, and that's why I spoke about, Sunny, when you asked me about these 4 cornerstones, I strongly feel, and not only feel, I've experienced it. I've experienced it in the military, I've experienced it in the corporate. The 4 cornerstones which I mentioned, passion, people, performance, legacy, they absolutely translate powerfully into corporate and individual settings. Let me take this a little further.
Sure.
Okay? Now, let me enunciate a couple of principles of war, which is the foundation of military leadership, and I would leave the analogy to you as to how relevant or irrelevant do you feel it is for corporate leadership. So here are a couple of principles of war. The first principle, Sunny, is selection and maintenance of aim. That's the first principle. What it means is having striking clarity on what you want to achieve, your mission, your aim, your vision, goals, and objectives. Defining the end state and ensuring that your strategies are directed towards achieving it. And it's always defined clearly, stated concisely, and once decided, it must be maintained. That's why it's called selection and maintenance of aim. So that's the first principle, right? I'm sure you're seeing the parallel in corporate leadership.
Yep.
Let's go to the second principle, maintenance of morale. Maintenance of morale is a term in the military for people, right? Where people are outrageously enthusiastic about their mission. And high morale fosters offensive spirit, will, and determination to achieve a goal. So for the corporate, you have high morale in people, they will go and deliver. Low morale, unlikely to deliver. The third principle is offensive action. It's the principle of the military, principle of war.
Yep.
I believe it's equally applicable to the corporate. What is offensive action? Simply put, no ground can ever be gained by defensive measures. So being proactive, taking action, taking initiative, equally applicable in corporate leadership.
Absolutely.
An extremely important one. Concentration of force and economy of effort. What does that mean? Simply put, you concentrate superior forces at the point of decision. We don't fritter budget, resources, time, energy. Another one, flexibility. Everybody is in the corporate talks about adaptability and flexibility and agility, all kinds of fancy names. Flexibility is a principle of war. To be able to adapt quickly to changing and fluid situations. And another one, which is, I would say, a lot can be taken from the military, is simplicity. It's a principle that you make clear, concise, uncomplicated plans which can be understood by all. So the short answer to your question, Sunny, is I believe that the cornerstones I spoke about, some of the principles I spoke about, they translate very powerfully to corporate settings.
Very interesting. Whenever I think of armed forces, whenever I think of the Indian Army, one word that resonates in my mind is discipline.
Absolutely.
So discipline is like the hallmark of our armed forces. How do you think, and what do you think we can do to instill a similar culture in corporate life?
Oh, wonderful. I've been in both, in the military and the corporate. So let me start first thing. The first, I will keep repeating the same thing which I've been talking about. Adopt the 4 cornerstones: passion, people, performance, legacy. I would feel that's the first thing comes to my mind.
Sure.
The next, I would plead for leaders to lead with example, because people are more touched by what they see rather than what they hear.
I hear you.
Building trust with people is so important. Because when you build trust with people, that discipline automatically will follow. Because what is trust? They trust the character of the leader and they trust the competence of the leader. Both is not character or competence, it is character and competence. Mission-oriented execution. I think that's a key one for discipline. When people, whatever work they're doing, they feel it's counting towards accomplishment of the mission, and that their work is being noticed. I spoke a little earlier about creating a cadence of ownership, accountability. That's a key element of discipline in a corporate. Everybody owns. What does it mean? Ownership is intrinsic. Accountability is extrinsic. I'm accountable to Sunny, but I own whatever I need to do with myself.
True.
So create that culture of ownership and accountability. And how do you do that? One key thing you need to do is you stop any below the line language. And what is below the line language? Below the line language is blame, excuse, denial, finger pointing. Now that is all below the line language. So when in a corporate that kind of language is cut off, there is a sense of ownership and accountability which comes in.
So cultural elevation as well.
Yes. And then we have to train people to be more resilient. To be resilient under pressure. Everything is not going to go the way you decided. It will go sideways. But then when you build that capability with discipline for people to be resilient, they are able to address those challenges. Sometimes I've spoken to some corporates and I said, it's not that complex. It's very simple. Rather, we spoke a little earlier about culture. Because if you have a culture, discipline becomes very synonymous to that. And if I can share, for a culture of an organization, if you just can put it on one sheet of paper, you take a sheet of paper, divide it into 3 columns. The center column is the core culture of an organization, right? What is the core culture? Core culture is as simple as what is the mission of that corporate? What is the purpose? What are the values? That's the core culture. You can add on a couple of things in the core culture. Example, what are your priorities? What's the priorities in an organization? Let me give you an example. And priorities are normally determined by even over statements. Example, values even over profits. That's creating a discipline in your organization, right? Long term, even over short term. It's creating a priority, everybody knows it. Think long term. What are your priorities? And what behaviors are either awarded, rewarded, or they are punished. So these couple of things are the core culture of an organization. If this is clear, discipline follows. The right side of that paper, because we're trying to reduce it to one sheet, right side of that paper, let's call it the emotional culture. What is the emotional culture of an organization? And the emotional culture of an organization, what does it mean? It means what are the couple of rituals which you like to follow? What are your traditions which you like to follow? In the military, there are a lot of traditions, right? Tradition is good and bad. So I'm not talking about the bad tradition, I'm talking about the good traditions. What are your rituals in an organization? What is the concept of feedback? Feedback is critical to uplift an organization, to create discipline. Is feedback sought for or is feedback avoided? Feedback. And to ensure feedback happens in an organization, it is important for that organization to create psychological safety. Do people feel safe to talk, to give feedback, to be radically truthful, to be radically transparent? Now, that couple of things which I shared is the emotional culture of an organization, right? And if you go to the other side of the paper, where one column is still blank,
Yeah.
that is the functional culture. What's the functional culture of an organization? And what does that mean? It means, how do you take decisions? What are the decision matrices? Whenever you structure these, then it becomes easy for an organization to form a particular culture. What's your principle? Is the principle that the decision should be taken closest to the point of decision, not up the chain? How do you convene and collaborate in meetings? That's a functional culture. What are certain norms and rules which you like to follow in the company? So when you put all these things together, Sunny, when you clarify that to all people, there is a sense of clarity. This is our core culture.
Yeah.
This is our emotional culture. This is our functional culture. It becomes that much simpler to instill discipline and ownership, because it's got to come as ownership, not that people have to be micromanaged to deliver. So I think these are a couple of thoughts to instill discipline in the corporate world, and some takes from the military as to how we can do that.
Fantastic. 𝗀𝗃 Lal, this has been very insightful for me personally and obviously for our audience. One, or rather, a final takeaway that we can have from this session that people can resonate once they get out of these episodes and get into trying to implement, what would that be from your side?
Sunny, I will just summarize what I've said.
Yeah.
And I would just strongly feel that if leaders are able to adopt these 4 cornerstones, and for purpose of clarity, passion, if a leader is not passionate, people are not following you. And how do you demonstrate passion? Have a clear mission, have a sense of values and pride in whatever you do. So that's the first cornerstone. People, the second cornerstone, is extremely crucial. And the one word I talked about was care for people. And I also mentioned that leaders at times care for people more than what others would think as wise, but still care for people. The third, performance. Performance is when people are cared for, it plays into performance, then they are willing to embrace challenges and explore and discover and meet goals and visions and missions. And the last is very important also, legacy. What will people remember you for when you've moved on? What will people remember you for? So I would say the interplay of these 4 cornerstones is when energy and inspiration is released, and that is when people's potential gets unleashed and aim, vision, goals, objectives are accomplished. That's what I would summarize this whole session into.
𝗀𝗃 Lal, this has been quite an insightful session. I genuinely feel that one of the best episodes is in the making as we are talking today. Your phenomenal experience, not only from the military side, but also as a corporate leader, and then hundreds of corporate leaders that you coached in your career, it truncates a simple concept of 4 cornerstones that anybody can lift and adapt to bring in transformative changes. And that simplicity of your coaching is instrumental. So thank you so much for joining me on this show today. It was an honor, and it was my pleasure having to host you today.
Thank you so much, Sunny. And all I can say is it was indeed a pleasure for me to be part of your wonderful show, the Sunny Shah Show. And all I can do is wish you and bless you for this show to be one of the best shows on the face of this earth.
Thank you so much, Colonel. It means a lot to me. Thank you so much. So, ladies and gentlemen, what an amazing conversation this was. Colonel Ajai Lal, an inspirational leader coming from the armed forces, who is spending his span bringing the entire experience that he carried over the last 40 years to all of us. For our viewers, for our listeners, if any of you want to consult Colonel Lal and his coaching, the information will be given in the description. Hey, please make sure you subscribe to our channel before you leave so that we can bring more such insightful videos to you every single week. This is me signing off. Thank you so much. Thanks for watching. Take care.